Good afternoon. Welcome to the third night of Virtual College Week. Thank you for joining us. This afternoon, we are focusing on you, the parents, and we'll learn everything you need to know to help your students transition into college or university, and we're going to learn all the ins and outs of the financial aid process. My name is Nashla Dewari. I will be facilitating today's session. Now, Virtual College Week would not be possible without our sponsors, Kaltura, Cooter, ACT, and the Florida Virtual Campus. We'd like to thank them because they have really made this event possible for you. Before we get started with today's presentations, I also want to go over a few items with you. After the presentations are completed, we'll conduct a question and answer session live. So if you have any questions for our experts tonight, you can type them in the question box throughout the presentation, and we will answer them at the end. Closed captioning is also provided for this event, and our session is being recorded and will be posted on our website, which is floridashines.org. We'll also be posting all of the materials we share with you tonight. Finally, we are live on Twitter, so feel free to share your comments, send your questions, and connect with us at FLShine. Now let's go ahead and begin the session. Our first speaker for today is Aisha Gordon, and she is here to tell us everything you need to know to support your students to be successful and help them transition to college and life after high school. Aisha has worked with Florida International University for 7 years. During her time there, she's focused on creating initiatives and procedures that proactively prepare a diverse group of incoming students. Aisha, thank you for taking the time to share your tips and expertise with us today. Welcome.
And thank you, Nashla. Hello, everyone. Glad to have you join us here. My name is Aisha Gordon. And again, we spoke a lot about your transition to college. I'm here to talk about yours specifically, when change is not considered a dirty word. During my time here, throughout my time, I've been able to recognize that this is both an exciting and frightening time for both you and your student. And I kind of want to break down what the steps that you need to take in order to support your student fully, in order for you to have a successful and your student to have a successful first year of college. So why are we here? Today, we'll be reflecting on the concerns of families for your first-year students, talking a lot about the concerns that you may have, exploring the transition process, sharing a lot about those examples of social, emotional, and even academic transitions of your students and families. And then I'm going to jump into some practicalities and delve into how you can help support your student throughout this transition. So first and foremost, if you take a look here, it's a great comic talking about the first day of school and then the first day of college. I wanted to first let you know that your concerns are valid. If you take time, if you wanted to take a minute and think about what has been the most challenging aspect of being a parent of a senior going to college, you probably think of a lot of things that far exceeds the idea of planning for classes, when it comes to academics, maybe moving. There's a lot to be considered when it comes to making this big transition. But I'm here to tell you that change is always just around the corner. Transition, luckily for both you and your student, this is a temporary time. Now, I know even though that this is going to be maybe an uncomfortable time for you, your student is actually going through a grand transition themselves. I'd have to think about it. So your student and you are probably delving into a new world with new rules. You're acting out in your anxieties. You're probably extremely sensitive to criticism. And for the first time, they're managing money, time, and relationships on their own. This is also usually the time in their lives when they're knowing when to get help. So here we're going to try to explore a lot of these examples, delve into it, just so that you have a better understanding of what your student is going through and then how you can help them. So what does this transition look like? First and foremost, we spoke a little bit about the new world that your student is going to be delving into. This is the time, usually their last year of high school, they're exploring their competencies. They're asking themselves, can I really do this? Do I fit in? And will I make the team socially? They're also questioning facets of their identity. Who am I? Who am I away from my parents maybe, or my family members? And then finally, they're examining what do they value? What is the right thing for me to do? It's times like this where communication is the most important role when it comes to you and your child's transition. This is the time when you're not only going to be encouraging them, but also letting them know that you respect and trust their ability to make choices on their own. And it's usually during these times that you would take time to create opportunities in order to discuss a lot of these things that they're questioning and they're concerned about themselves that they might not even be speaking to you about. A next transition that we're actually going to be talking about is one probably that's you've been speaking about mostly, which is academics and wellness. Now here in this comic, you'll notice that individual, they hear the word plan ahead, and then they see that's a very good slogan, and it's true. However, in the end, our students end up stuck just like this individual in this cartoon. Unfortunately, your student and yourself are probably being branded with the idea that you need to plan, and the thought is nice. However, things aren't done, and then your student for their first semester end up getting stuck because of planning for this transition. First and foremost, when it comes to high school and the academics, your student is in class for about 40 hours per week. It's almost like a job. However, for college, they're only in classes 16 to 18 hours per week. High school seniors spend actually less than 6 hours a week studying, and that's totally different for a college student. For every 1 hour a student spends in the classroom, they need to spend another 2 doing homework or research or studying, and those additional commitments aren't thought of, and they must be accounted for in order to facilitate success. So that type of conversation with your student before they actually pick your classes, jump in and get really excited, because they need to look at realistically how to manage their time wisely outside of just academics. In the same line, when your student comes to school, they are not just here to come and finish school. There's also wellness associated. There's a balance. And in the end, for our students, because they're taking part in a lot of these time management issues, sleep difficulties are actually within the top 3 factors impacting their performance, along with stress and anxiety. It's really throughout this planning that happens now, before they actually pick their courses, before they're picking or choosing their universities, where you're having these conversations that will allow you to make an easier transition. So readiness is the key factor. It'll say that 87% of high school seniors actually want to go to college. However, 42% of incoming college students felt that they were unprepared to meet the expectations of college. These are factors that I believe it was a survey in 2015 that were taken, and this still exists today. You as a parent can help this. Most individuals, when they make that transition from high school seniors all the way as an incoming freshman, don't recognize that the transition is going to be so big, and you as a parent really can change that for them for their first year. However, your role is going to be a little bit different than it's been over these past couple of years. You're going to be getting your student ready, not you. You are no longer their project manager, the one who decides how they go about things or different things like that. You are now their consultant and their coach, allowing them to make their choices, however, by guiding them and preparing them to make such educated choices. So how are you going to do that? Because it sounds all nice and good, but I'm going to actually give you some practicals so that you can prepare and safely transition both yourself and your child into their first year of college. So first and foremost, you're here, you're coming to College Week, and that's great in order to educate your student. But also, when it comes to educating first and foremost, you really need to instill a habit now where you both read through everything and get a full understanding of what's needed. Throughout my years in working in university and working in different parts of the university and how they affect, I see how missing one thing on the many emails that you might get or the many correspondence from the university can really affect a student's retention. Their first year is usually more difficult due to the inability to not only read everything, but ask the questions to get a full understanding of what's needed. During this time in your student's life and during their college career, things actually affect one another, from when they decide to take on another class to their finances. They all affect one another, and it's very important that you take the time now to instill a habit and teach your student in order to read through everything and have a full understanding of what's needed. Secondly, you should develop a practice of asking those questions with you and your student. In the end, as a parent or as a family member of a senior going into college and making that transition, you end up running into a lot of what ifs, a lot of questions. And you yourself probably are really good at asking those questions. However, it's developing your student so that they ask when you're not there. Unfortunately, during this time, there are so many caveats associated with the choices that they need to make regarding admissions to picking their classes, and it's really going to do your student the justice if they've already learned that from you before they left. Another part of educating is being realistic and specific regarding financial concerns. This is really the time when you're having those conversations concerning the balancing of money from their day-to-day to their weekly budget. It's a great time to take time away from right before they move in order to develop a budget with them. Creating that plan really helps, and it also lets you know the responsibilities between you as a parent or a family member and your student regarding financial concerns. Also, we're going to be creating a plan of academic success now. If you remember a little bit previously, we spoke about time management and how the balance of academic and wellness really affects our student. And because they're not able to balance and they try to succeed, they end up running into an issue because they didn't plan accordingly. If you know your student or your student knows these certain things about themselves, where it's not beneficial to have classes at certain times or this amount of coursework, or maybe math or reading or a certain course would be more difficult for them, it's better to plan academic success now so that it's with them and they don't have to do this by themselves. Remember, during this time, because they're questioning their own abilities and their thoughts about what do they need to do and their choices that they need to make in order to be successful, your experience really helps them with this. And by doing it with them, it allows them to make changes if need be once they're actually in and starting their first semester of college. And then lastly, I know that you're getting quite a bit of leaflets from different universities that you're looking at. Get to know the campus resources. These universities that I've seen and I've worked with, they are striving to help your student and you. There are resources such as disability resources, their counseling services. Their resources are set up to support your student, and most of the time, believe it or not, even though we receive this information, we don't utilize it because we don't have that conversation of what could I use beforehand. This would really help to benefit your student during their first year. Now what you'll notice, after educating them, okay, we've spent time, we've given them the homework, parents, you've instilled a habit into your student in order to make good choices, you are now going to stop educating and empower them to set clear expectations. What I mean when I say setting clear expectations between student and parent responsibilities, this is now where you start and to begin the conversation of this is where students' responsibilities start, and this is where my responsibility as a parent ends in regards to academics, in regards to choices they make when it comes to them completing their work on time or passing the classes or even financial concerns. It's better to have and set clear expectations now so that students can plan accordingly for their first year, and then in the end you're empowering them because they're going to start making independent choices. In the same way, allow them to make those independent choices. This is the time that college is meant to be tough, and they will be stretched in every way, mentally, socially, emotionally, physically. Be clear with them that regardless if they stumble, they'll always be able to help them problem solve the situation. So empowering is less of, it's giving space, but understanding that they can seek your help one day and reject it the next. Another part of empowering is holding them accountable for their performance and behavior. We spoke a little bit earlier about that new boundaries are being formed and new patterns for how this relationship will work. Previously, before any of your students' decisions was affected by you, the parent. However, now this is really during the time of adulthood where they begin to hold themselves accountable to their performance when it comes in school, out of school, and their behavior when it comes to that time management part that we spoke previously. This is the time when they learn the best, where what works for them, whether that be that early morning class or that late class, when they should study, and this is the time you actually need to give them that space and let them leave room for mistakes. Mistakes does not mean that they will fall and stumble. It means that they'll be able to move forward because you took time to educate them earlier. And then lastly, once you are done educating and empowering, if you notice, practicals in order to help your student for a transition, it slowly reduces the amount of bullet points I use. The reason why is because slowly but surely, if you do what you need to do in the education stage and you empower them and start to have those types of conversations and build those expectations and allow them to make their own choices, then all you would need to do in order to help them successfully transition their first year is engage. We spoke about positive affirmations. Previously, their social competencies and them questioning their identity and their value, they're sensitive to criticism. So during this time, even though you may know better for certain things, your positive affirmations are crucial. And the important part to that is figuring out how to stay connected, whether that means that you speak this certain time a week or it's every day. As long as you set those conversations now and you stay connected, it shows that I'm going to always be there. I'm not going to be instructing you. I'm going to allow you to make your decisions. However, I'm still here if you need help to solve a problem. And that also rings into our last point, which is providing reassurance without rescuing. This is not the time where we take it into your own hands and rescue them from their mistakes. College was meant to learn them, it was meant to help them learn how to help themselves in order for them to make really successful choices and build a clear identity of who they are as an individual and as a successful student. So the next thing that I was actually going to say is that there might be a lot of questions. We've worked in a lot of universities for me and a lot of offices. So please submit your questions to the question box, and I'll answer them at the end of the presentation. I'll actually now hand it over to my co-presenter, Bill.
Thank you, Aisha. And actually, if you don't mind me jumping in really quickly, I just wanted to thank you and say how important it is for parents to know that change is not a bad word and that being a little uncomfortable is part of the process. But truly, if you understand the process, it makes a world of difference for your students. So I'm going to just reiterate your message: educate, empower, and engage. So thank you, Aisha, again for sharing that message with us. And like you said, to our audience, if you have questions for Aisha, go ahead and send them in the question box, and we'll share them with her at the end of the session. Now we're going to talk about the money and how you can help your students pay for college without breaking the bank. So our next speaker is Bill Spires. And Bill, let me tell you a little bit about Bill's extensive experience. Bill has 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree from Jacksonville University. He has been in financial aid since 1983 when he became the director of the Student Financial Assistance at Jacksonville University. In 1997, he became the director of financial aid at Tallahassee Community College, and since then he served on several state and national organizations and committees, including the U.S. Department of Education Student Aid Advisory Committee. He's been published in several education outlets, including College Board Trends and Inside Higher Education. He has appeared on NPR and several local media channels. We are really honored to have Bill join us today. So, Bill, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nasha. It's good to be with you this afternoon, and welcome to the daunting process of financing the college education. I always call this Financial Aid 101 because I see it as an educational opportunity. One of the first questions that parents and families want to know is who pays for higher education. Well, that responsibility primarily rests with the student and his or her family, where appropriate. This was actually codified as part of the Higher Education Act of 1965. Lyndon Johnson was president. He had to sell his Model T Ford to finance his college education, so he feels like every student should have skin in the game and pay for part of their education. When the family can't pay for that college education, when there's a gap as determined through a national needs analysis system, financial aid steps in to help the family. That is the role of financial aid, to try to help and fill the gap in need. The big question is, how much is the family expected to contribute? Well, under federal methodology, we calculate how much a family will contribute. That number is used at every college in the country. It doesn't vary. The U.S. Department of Education develops a formula as outlined by the Congress, and they tell us how much that contribution will be. The one thing I can tell you, it's always more than the family feels they can contribute, and based on my knowledge and experience, yes, it is. What is included in the dependent family student contribution? We will have a contribution from the student, from any income they have, assets, or untaxed income. We will also have a contribution for a dependent student from his or her parent. We're going to look at their income, assets, untaxed income, prepaid and 529 programs. That would include any of those programs owned by the student proper. The dependent student contribution includes the number of family members. We look at the number of family members in college excluding parents, note that one, and then we look at the age of the older parent. That's because the closer we get to retirement, the more of our income they protect. We can look at other items under a system called professional judgment, and we can, again, put things into the formula that are not allowed on the front end. Those things include things such as K through 12 private education, changes in the family's financial circumstances, and parents in college. You have to petition the college to do this. Some colleges do, some don't. It's an individual college decision, but it's well worth you finding out if you have any of those things that apply. An independent student's contribution differs from the dependent student's contribution only in that the parental information is excluded from the form. How is need determined? We take the cost of education, we subtract the expected family contribution, and that gives us need. Cost of education includes tuition, fees, room, board, books, transportation, and personal expense. There are other items schools can include, such as computers. If the student had a child they needed dependent care for, we could include that. If they have, if they're a student who has a disability, we can include the cost of the disability. Those would all be done at the school level. The cost of education varies. I was at Yale University a couple of years ago. Their cost is about $60,000 a year for tuition. At the state university system, a school like FSU or University of Florida, their total cost is about $22,000 to $23,000 a year. Community colleges are somewhere between $12,000 and $14,000 a year. The cost of education covers some but not all of a student's true personal expense. The personal expense item is there to provide access for students to get their clothes washed, buy personal need items, and every now and then a pizza out. It's not going to make them rich. And the main thing you need to remember is the cost of education you see does not determine affordability. Schools offer many plans for students that bring that cost down. The analogy that's used too often, it's not what I like, but it is appropriate, is it's like buying a car. The cost you see is not the price you're going to pay. So cost of education does not determine affordability. The expected family contribution is called the EFC. Financial aid is the world of acronyms. EFC, SEOG, FAFSA, all of these are terms that we use. If we're ever using a term you don't understand, please stop us, let us know, because we want to clarify what we're saying. So keep us in the loop, let us know when we venture off into our own language. The difference between the cost of education and the EFC is the EFC is a constant. It does not change based on the cost of education. It's usually more than you feel you can contribute, but it's the best device we have to determine need. The best way to look at it, it's truly not a needs analysis formula, but it's a rationing formula, taking the limited dollars available from the federal government and spreading them over the largest population they possibly can. There's 5 things you should really remember today. Apply early, follow up, communicate, and watch out for the scams. Every student should apply for scholarship using the free resources only, from the public library to community areas such as where the student works, the parent works, the Kiwanis Rotary Clubs, churches, synagogues, all offer scholarships. you need to check there. The financial aid offices at the schools you're applying to. Your guidance office. I know these are virtual students, but many of them have a guidance office. The things that are in the guidance office change every day. They need to check every day to see what's arrived. And then the Internet. Again, only use the free resources on the Internet. I have given you a few here. I encourage you to use those sources and see what you qualify for. The student should also apply for financial aid using the free application for federal student aid. The form for 17 opened up on October 1st. You can apply at any point, and you need to, if your son or daughter is a senior, you need to get that application in immediately. You need to sign the form electronically using a federal ID. You can obtain that online, and every student needs their own federal ID, and at least one parent needs a federal ID to sign the FAFSA. Some institutions have their own application. You need to check for that. The state of Florida application is open and online. If their counselor or if they haven't applied already, they need to do that, especially for Bright Futures. The College Board profile is used at a limited number of schools. Schools like the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Emory, Duke are some of the schools that use the profile. You need to find out that would be an additional form you would need to fill in, but you need to make sure you apply. Apply early. Meet the deadline dates. Create a tick list. When you complete an event, check it off, but make sure you apply early, because when you don't apply early, you're throwing money away. We don't want you to lose money. We want you to get every dollar for which you are eligible. Follow up with us. If you send us something, make sure we get it. Things do get lost. We get empty envelopes every day. Things happen. If you keep a copy of every document you send and create a file that you put all of those in, if something gets lost, you can get it to us quickly. You want to keep your file active, and you need to make sure additional items aren't needed. As a reminder, never send your Social Security number by email unless the email is password protected. That is something that is big in our area right now. People are fishing for your information, and we don't want you to experience identity theft. And then communicate with us. If there's a change in your family's financial situation, we won't know it unless you tell us. So make sure you let us know about anything that happens that might improve your situation for financial aid. It's better to over-communicate than under-communicate. And watch out for the scams. The way I like to put it is anybody who wants to charge you for this process, turn and run. This is a free process. There's plenty of help available to you. I encourage you to use the free resources, and do not let anyone charge you for any part of the process. The reason it says free application for federal financial aid is because when the application originally came out, people were actually trying to sell the form. So I strongly recommend you stay away from people who are trying to charge you. I gave you a few tips today for completing the FAFSA. You do need to have your tax information. That needs to be in front of you. You need to read the instructions. Most of the mistakes we see are because people fail to read and follow the directions that are in the form. Check your work. It's easy to misalign a number. And you need to complete a form every year the student's in school. Where you've already started the ability to complete the form on October 1st, 2016. This is the first year we're using prior year data, which means to complete the form, you need your 2015 tax information. That's good news because that's already completed and done. Now, here's what that confuses people. Students are dependent until the age of 24. There are limited circumstances where a student can be independent under the age of 24. They include such things as having a child for whom they provide at least 50% of the support for, or being married, a few things like that. Living outside the parent's home, being self-sufficient, or not having general contact with the parents do not make a student independent by federal regulation. Divorced parents who are remarried are considered married. We will include the information from the step-parent, but we will exclude the parent of the non-custodial parent. In that situation, if it's a divorce situation, it's the parent with whom the student resides that fills in the free application for federal student financial aid. If that is a 50-50 situation, it's the parent who claims the student on their taxes. If the student claims themselves, look at both sides. If it's a 50-50 living arrangement, use the parent with the lower income. But the first thing you look to is where does the student live for a majority of the year. That supersedes the person claiming them on their taxes. If the student has to list Social Security benefits that are supplemental, that would go under the parent section, not under the student section. They probably will not have to. And you do need to complete your taxes. That statement in there is because there are some people who filed late, but you need to complete this from a completed tax form at this point. The good news is they have to have been filed by October 1st. You can estimate your taxes. You shouldn't have to anymore, but the department still tells us that we should tell people that is an option if they don't have their tax information. If you do it as correctly as possible. If you overestimate, you will cut yourself off from funds. Underestimate, you'll get funds that will have to be taken away. I'm telling you here to use the IRS data retrieval tool. Well, the bad news is right now that tool is down. We do not know when it's coming back up. That would have been what I would have told you to do because it makes the form so much easier. The FAFSA is an intuitive form, and as things are filled in, it adds and removes questions as is appropriate. This would have removed most of your financial questions. Make sure you use the correct school code, and remember, only the biological or adoptive parents complete the form for dependent students. Grandparents, aunts, and uncles, other family members with whom the student resides should not fill in the form unless they adopted them, and the child had to be adopted before the age of 13. If they are 13 years or older and the child has been adopted, they are automatically independent. And remember to sign the form. Use that federal ID to sign. It's the fastest way. You can print a paper form, but it does slow the process, I can tell you. And if you need help, ask. Don't be afraid. You can check with the chosen college or university, with the U.S. Department of Education. You can do that online or with them. There are multiple resources available to you, but make sure you do this right the first time, because if you don't, it slows the process and you lose the money. I show you a picture of the FAFSA here. I'm not going over this today, but what I can tell you is on an average it takes 36 minutes to complete this form the first time. After the first time, that reduces to 25 minutes. The bulk of the form is what I refer to as directory information, name, address, that kind of information. Probably the most difficult part, yes, is the financial section, but if you follow the directions, it tells you exactly what to do. Let me assure you it's not nearly as difficult as it looks. Every parent I've ever worked with has been able to do it in record time. I show you some changes to the process here. Right now, the biggest change, and it's not on here, is the data retrieval tool is down, but we will hopefully have it back up at least by the next processing cycle. After you file your FAFSA, you'll get a document called a SAR, a Student Aid Report. You'll receive this most likely by email if you gave a legitimate email. You need to check it for accuracy, make sure all the schools you're interested in are listed, check the schools you've listed to see when they begin issuing awards. If you're selected for verification, there's going to be additional documents that you'll have to send. You can go ahead and begin that process. I can't tell you what documents you'll have to send because there are 5 levels of verification, and I don't know which one you'll fall at. So the school will have to tell you once the federal government tells them. The school does not make that choice. The U.S. Department of Education does. Simultaneous to you receiving your SAR, Student Aid Report, the school receives an ISER, Institutional Student Information Record. We will check it to see if you're selected for verification. If you are, we'll ask you for the documents we need. At the time selected, if your file is complete, we'll issue an award letter. If you are selected for verification and we find errors, by law we have to correct those errors, and that slows the process. That's why it's important to check the form. The note there, if selected for verification and you did not use the IRS match, then you will have to submit, in most cases, an IRS tax transcript. We cannot accept your 1040 form. The U.S. Department of Education mandates that we get a tax transcript. You can order those online still, so you might want to have one handy just in case. Once we begin the process, we issue you an award letter which tells you how much aid, what kind of aid, how to cancel, modify, and reject your financial aid. Your financial aid award letter is basically your agreement with the school as to what you should expect if you do everything that is required by the federal government. Remember, every student receiving financial aid must be fully admitted to a degree-seeking program with a high school diploma, a GED, or a homeschool diploma. That is required by the U.S. Department of Education. The kinds of aid you might receive: scholarships, grants, need-based grants, work, and loan. Need-based grants include the federal Pell Grant, which go to the neediest students. Those are supplemented by the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. That's supplemented by the Florida Student Assistance Grant. Institutional need-based grants are usually used to help the students who are outside the Pell Grant range. They can be helped for the others, but generally it goes to the students who aren't receiving other forms of grant aid. Scholarships and grants are usually based on academics or talent. They have conditions attached. Music scholarship may require you to play oboe in the orchestra. A track scholarship may require you to run track or cross country. But they're gift money and do not have to be repaid. They're considered free money. So that's very important, and you always want to seek free money first. We've talked about scholarships and where to find those. Again, I want to give you one more encouragement to look for scholarships. Work-study is a phenomenal program, and I strongly recommend students participate. They work on campus. They work in an office, usually on campus, or if they're off campus, they're in an office or working with students in a school, and they have the opportunity to gain experience, to put on a resume. The pay is usually a little bit less than the private sector, but you know what? Next year, when they reapply for financial aid, any work-study funds don't go against that student when they're calculating the student's contribution for financial aid. So it has a real advantage. I can tell you that I'm in higher education today because of work-study. I had the opportunity to work for the dean for 4 years in college. She became the president, and I had the opportunity to go to work for her as assistant to the president. That's how I got into higher education. I'm a big proponent of federal work-study. Loans are an excellent tool for financing higher education. Perkins loans will not exist when your children enter college now. It doesn't look like. We're not sure, so I left it on here. Next year, I most likely will have to remove that. But you have the subsidized and unsubsidized loans, the direct loans. The subsidized loans, they pay the interest while the student's in school. Unsubsidized loan, interest accrues. Plus loans, parents, you can borrow to help your kid with their education. Interest accrues on those loans. Again, never borrow $1 more than you need. Borrowing should be your final option, and you should borrow the least amount possible. I know I've said that several times, but I can't emphasize it enough. Don't borrow for lifestyle, borrow for need. The last thing I want to address with you today is you may have to write an essay for a scholarship or go to a scholarship interview. If you have to do that, I strongly recommend that you know about the scholarship, who created it, why does it exist. Answer every question on the application. The one students leave blank with the greatest level of frequency is extracurricular activities. We don't know why, but they do. but they need to tell us what their extracurricular activities are. They should never use a prepared essay. These days, we just run them through a computer, and it tells us if there's plagiarism. You should practice for the interview. I tell students to get a camcorder, get some friends, parents, pop some popcorn, and do mock interviews. It helps them see where all of their idiosyncrasies are. It shows them where they can improve, and it can strengthen their ability to go in and talk to an interviewer. They should answer all questions honestly and with their opinion. Always be able to justify your opinion when you answer a question, because what we're looking for is our students looking for scholarships who can think critically and defend their position. They need to know their strengths and weaknesses, likes and dislikes. They should know current events, and they should dress conservatively. They should look nice when they enter the room. They should have a strong appearance when they come through the door. Eye contact, how they present themselves is very important in this process, I can tell you, with my years of experience. And then if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. That's a quote that hangs over the door to my office. It was by Dr. Derek Bach, who's a former president of Harvard. The average college graduate, according to College Board statistics, makes $1.5 million more in a lifetime than the student who doesn't go to college. If they go for an associate's degree, it's about $1 million, and a certificate pushes it up to about $750,000. Regardless of what you hear in the media, any other place, education is still an outstanding investment, and it's the one thing people can't take away from you. Once you have it, you have it. And with that, I will turn it back over, and I know that we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have at this time. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you, Bill. We appreciate all this information. There are so many components to the financial aid process, but truly we appreciate you breaking them down and encouraging our audience to get started early, apply early so you don't lose any money, and stay organized. Keep copies of everything. Bill, I really like what you said. We get that question a lot. If you're told to pay for any of these services or any part of the financial aid process, you should turn and run. And again, to reiterate, free money is good money. So again, thank you, Bill, so much for sharing your expertise. I also want to remind our audience, if you'd like to learn more about the FAFSA and actually fill out the form, we have a hands-on workshop next Wednesday, April 12th at 3 p.m., focusing on how to fill out the FAFSA. You can get your documentation between now and then and join us on Wednesday to fill out the form. You can also register for that session. It's online at floridashines.org. Now I'd like to open up the floor for any questions you may have for our experts tonight. And so if you would type them in the question box and let us know what we can share with our speakers. Aisha, if you don't mind, I have a question regarding the admissions process from a parent who is wondering how early they can get started with the admissions application process with their students.
How early is a great question, as early as possible. But the best part about it is for these universities, they start, especially when it comes to working a lot with the high school seniors, they're more so working towards juniors now. So if the conversation of starting the application process, I know a lot of universities are even looking towards things to 1 year in advance. That's definitely the earliest, but when it comes to the latest, because I think that's a better conversation, sometimes things can creep up, and we end up getting caught up in doing so many things when it comes to this application process. But the best point about it is if you can work towards 3 months before the semester actually starts. That is really the latest I would say in order to get everything situated, because in reality, for the admissions process, there's a lot that must be done that is far more than just submitting an application and getting the high school transcripts. They need to complete their SAT and ACT, so there's time that you want to give your student as much time in order to complete that, in order to get a test score that they feel really good about before submitting their application. So that's a lot of things just to consider. And then going on to what Bill was talking about, for the FAFSA, you really want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row, and it gives it time in order for things to be processed, and if need be, provide any further documentation so that they're ready for the start of their semester.
Thank you, Aisha. Absolutely. It's all about preparing and starting early. Bill, I think our next question is related to just reiterating where people can go for more information at the federal level. Where would you recommend people go at the website to learn more information?
Well, the first thing that I would recommend is that, of course, the website and information is actually in the slide that I put there. If I can go back to that very quickly. But the first thing that I would do, I personally would do, here's the sources of help. Can they see that?
Yes.
These are the sources and the phone numbers. But the first thing that I would do is contact the schools I was most interested in, and talk to them directly, because they may be able to give you some help there that the Department of Education can't.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. And for our audience member, the FLDOE, if you're looking for Florida resources, it's a great place to start as well. So, Bill, I have a sort of a specific question related to financial aid, if you don't mind. A student who may be eligible for DEA because one of the parents being in the military, if the student is still undecided about the major, but the forms they have to fill out actually request the specific school and major, can you walk us through who they may talk to, either in high school or the VA counselor or both? If they're really undecided about what major they want to go into, do they absolutely have to know when they fill out that form? How does that work?
Generally, at this point, they don't have to know the exact major or school they're going to. We receive these all the time, but once they know, they need to get that form filled in and to the probably to the VA person at the school he or she's going to. That would be one of my first contacts, again, as a VA rep at the school to see what they need and what their guidance is. You can call the VA. They're often difficult to reach, and sometimes the information is a little weaker than what we would like. So that's why I recommend calling the VA rep at the schools you're interested in, and they should be able to walk you through it without any difficulty at all.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. We will share that information with our audience as well if they're still with us. Our other question, in addition to resources for parents, can you or have you participated in College Goals Sunday? Do you recommend that as a resource for parents if they're working through the financial aid process, and where can they learn more?
Well, to be real frank, I was the original person that signed the contract to bring College Goals Sunday to Florida. College Goals Sunday is an excellent event. There's usually people who are financial aid experts on site. They can help you with anything that's going on. Most of the College Goals Sundays for this year have already occurred, but they will occur again next year. A lot of the schools in your immediate area will provide you assistance even if you're not going to their institution. Here at TCC, I provide guidance to families all the time, regardless of the school they're going to. So we're always ready to help. So again, the college and university resources are good if you're having trouble And if there's a College Goal event in your area, I recommend you attend it.
Well, Bill, that's actually great to know. I have participated in Colorado. I know it's a nationwide event, so so great to know you were a part of it in the very beginning. As a follow-up to that, Bill, there is a website that we've been asked about recently, and I'm not sure if you have any insight if it's a good place for parents and students to go. It's raise.me. Have you heard about it? Do you have any thoughts about that website?
I have not been on that website, to be quite frank with you. I would be happy to review it and get back with you on that.
Okay, sure. We know it's a website for scholarships, and so we thought it's fairly new, and so I wasn't sure if you knew. Aisha, I want to go back to you a little bit and talk about the process of sort of taking courses in college while still in high school, dual enrollment. Can you give us your thoughts about how parents can support their students through that process and how beneficial it is for students, and any tips or best practices you would recommend?
Actually, I can. Just recently, about a week ago, we're bringing, with my university, we're actually bringing a lot of our dual enrollment students and giving them the opportunity to do it online. So it's very interesting. It's very new, but I was working a lot with that department on campus, and for right now, it's something that's going to continue. I've been seeing dual enrollment as early as freshman year, and I've met a lot of students now who are making that transition over to college. It's much smoother, more so because a lot of the scariness on top of the transition point is really the coursework. The coursework is new. It's different. The group work is initiated in a different way, the need to collaborate or this initiative that they need to take. There's just different skills and academic merit needed in order to complete a lot of this first-year classes. And so, but with dual enrollment, because at least in our university, the professor does not treat you any different. They do not know that you're a dual enrollment student. And so the same way that the coursework goes and the university goes, you get more than just a feel. Like you're taking a class just like a degree-seeking student. So in that regards, it's very beneficial. And then on top of that, of course, when it comes to spending the least amount of money as you can when it comes to college, it allows you for that opportunity so that we have a lot of students who are starting now as freshmen, not really classified as freshmen, but if anything, ready to jump into their majors as juniors because they started at an earlier time. That is something to consider for your student. Now, the balancing of time and coursework in comparison, that's something that you're going to want to talk about with your student and make sure that this is a wise thing for them. But honestly, they've really made it beneficial for them, and it only helps once they move and transition over to college.
Thank you, Aisha. Truly does prepare the student, starts to give them a little bit of what it's like to fully be in a college or university environment. Now, I think a lot of times, well, and actually this event, we focus on juniors in high school, and so I wonder if you could talk a little bit also about this summer, what they can do to start thinking about visiting campuses if they can, or things they should consider to select the right college or university?
This is a very productive time. Right now, for a lot of juniors, I know a lot of their high school counselors are having this conversation in regards to testing, so setting up times for testing. But outside of that, when it comes to picking colleges, there's a couple of things that I would consider just looking back and working amongst the different universities that I have. One, size, when it comes to class size and what they expect for a university and what they're looking for, really does affect your student. If they've come from a place where for them a 50,000 students population is not necessarily the best in comparison to a 5,000 student population, that's something to consider. It's usually not something that we actually talk about, but honestly, because of what a faculty can produce for a different population, it's just the schools run very differently. They have a different culture, and that's something that your student would want to consider before deciding of like, that is my dream school, that's the school that I'm interested on going to. Because even though on paper it might be something that they like, unfortunately because the culture is different, this is really the time to for something that has either a major amount of student population or a lower one, this is really the time to visit those schools in order to have that type of conversation. So that's one. Secondly, I'm very interested when it comes to picking in programs for universities is looking at what type of partnerships do they have with the community. Because your student, depending on what they're trying to do, it's very, very important for them to take part in a university that is not only focused on the community, but working towards different partnerships. Because that way, regardless if they're undecided now and they decide a major further on in their career, now it allows them to have programs that have that networking set up so that it prepares them after college. I know we're starting with just the transition, but honestly, choosing your university does have to do with life after college, and that's something to consider when it comes to picking schools.
Thank you, Aisha. Definitely lots of things to consider. And Bill, I'll go back to you. Once they've certainly visited, applied, been admitted, and completed the financial aid process, we have a couple of questions regarding award letters and when students can expect that award letter to potentially make a decision on where they want to go. Can you talk a little about that?
Sure, and it varies by sector. The private universities such as Rollins and Stetson and JU and University of Miami, they actually probably started sending their letters out in January or February this year, depending on the school. In the public sector, the University of Florida started theirs back last month, actually. They started sending theirs because of the new FAFSA date. Community colleges usually send ours out later. April and May are usually when ours start going out. So it varies by sector and varies by school. Each school determines their own date, and they will tell you usually in a publication when to expect those to go out. But usually, again, you can look at that kind of a schedule. The private schools, January, February, public schools, February, March, community colleges, April, May.
Okay, that's good to know. So if we have seniors on the line, there's still time if they haven't heard from their students. So thank you.
Well, let me say this to that. There is still time up until the day they enroll. They need to get those in, even if it's at the last minute, because, you know, there are funds that don't run out, such as Pell Grant. There are funds that don't run out, such as the student loans. If you need money for college, you need to apply at any point, but you need to do it as soon as possible to get the most free money possible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Bill. Great advice. Aisha, we have another question related to admissions into a university. For students who have ACE courses, how do they play into admissions criteria, and how are they looked at for eligibility into admissions for a university?
Well, they're recognized not necessarily by their GPA, but they are recognized when it comes to what classes transfer over. So in regards to admissions, they're still looking at high school transcripts, still looking at your test scores. However, once they're admitted to university, the question is, what classes do I not have to take, and what was able to be solidified due to taking that exam. So it's granting, it's like a credit by exam, so it's less based off of admission requirements, doesn't affect it, but it is beneficial towards when it comes to your overall admissions packet.
Okay, thank you, Aisha. And I think I'm just paying attention to our question box. I think that is all of the questions we have from the audience. I'd like to ask you if you have any last words of wisdom, Aisha and Bill, that you can share with our parents online today.
I would say to the moms and dads and students that are out there, the financial aid process is free. It's well worth your time to apply. You never know what you're going to get until you apply. Do everything you can to make college affordable and get your applications in as soon as possible. We want to see every kid in college somewhere.
Yes, and in that same line of thinking, working with the university, you as your greatest support. You're not doing this by yourself, and that is something that we get a little focused that it's just you and your student. But honestly, the universities here are here to support you, and you can utilize them.
Thank you both. This information has been so valuable. We really appreciate you. Once again, thank you for taking the time this evening to share your expertise with our parents. We are going to wrap up the evening. Before we finish the evening, I would like to once again also thank our sponsors for this event, the Florida Virtual Campus, Cooter, Kaltura, and ACT. They've really made this event possible for us to send to you. As a reminder, after this event, for our audience, you will receive a follow-up email with a survey. We hope you take a couple minutes to fill it out and tell us how we can continue to improve and bring this event to you. All presentations and materials from tonight will be posted on floridashines.org. And if you have additional questions or need additional information, you can email us at collegenight@flvc.org. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter and interact with us at FL Shines. So thank you again for taking the time to join us tonight. Have a great evening.